Oak Island is not a treasure hunt. It is an engineering problem. By the end, we will answer what the swamp road was for. What began in 1795 as the discovery of a simple depression in the ground has become a 200-year collision between searchers with modern equipment and an original construction they cannot defeat. The question is not whether something is buried there. The question is, who engineered an industrial-scale, self-defending site on Oak Island centuries before its official discovery? And why did they build it to a specification that modern crews with multi-million-dollar budgets still cannot overcome? The official record is simple. 3 boys found a circular depression beneath an oak tree. Above it hung a tackle block on a sawed limb. They dug. At 10 feet, they hit a platform of oak logs. At 20 feet, another. At 30 feet, another. The pattern suggested a shaft. The story suggested pirates. For 2 centuries, that story has shaped every excavation, every theory, every explanation offered to the public. Pirates buried treasure. They dug a pit. They built a trap to protect it. The narrative is clean. The engineering is not. The flood tunnels are the first impossibility. At a depth of 93 feet, searchers in 1803 broke through into a layer that immediately filled with seawater. The water rose and fell with the tide. It was not groundwater. It was ocean water, channeled deliberately from Smith's Cove, more than 500 feet away. Subsequent excavations revealed a system of box drains radiating from the beach into the pit. These were not simple ditches. They were stone-lined channels, graded to carry seawater inland, buried beneath layers of eelgrass and coconut fiber to filter silt and prevent clogging. The coconut fiber alone presents a logistics problem. It is not native to Nova Scotia. It had to be imported in massive quantity, spread across the beach in layers thick enough to function as an industrial filtration mat, and then buried under stones and sand. The effort required to transport, place, and conceal this material is inconsistent with a temporary pirate operation. The engineering required to construct the drains themselves is inconsistent with any operation lacking hydrological surveying and cofferdam technology. To build a box drain on a tidal beach, you must first hold back the ocean. A cofferdam for a project of this scale would need to extend hundreds of feet, be sunk deep enough to reach bedrock or impermeable clay, and remain sealed long enough for crews to excavate, line, and grade the channels before the tide returned. The arithmetic is not speculative. The distance from Smith's Cove to the Money Pit is 525 feet. The drains were buried at a depth sufficient to pass beneath the water table. The tidal range on Oak Island is approximately 5 feet. A cofferdam capable of holding back that volume of water across that distance for the duration required to complete the work would need to be a permanent earthwork, reinforced with timber cribbing and clay ceiling. There is no record of such a structure. There is no evidence it was ever dismantled. 17th century pirates operating without surveying instruments, without geological maps, without knowledge of the island's subsurface hydrology, are supposed to have designed and executed this system as a temporary measure to protect a single burial? The official explanation requires us to accept that they succeeded where modern engineers have failed. The comparison is not rhetorical. Between 1965 and 1966, Robert Dunfield brought industrial equipment to Oak Island. He used a 70-ton crane and a bulldozer to excavate a pit 140 feet deep and 100 feet wide. His goal was to locate and seal the flood tunnels. He failed. The water could not be stopped. Between 1970 and 2011, multiple teams using concrete, steel casings, and high-volume pumps attempted to block the flow. All failed. The original builders, working with wood and stone, created a system that has outlasted every modern attempt to neutralize it. That is not luck. That is engineering. The wood itself contradicts the pirate timeline. Samples taken from the original timber platforms in the money pit have been carbon dated. The results place their origin between 1320 and 1390. Not 1795. Not 1600s. 1300s. Medieval. The platforms the boys found in 1795 were not the remains of a recent pirate burial. They were the remnants of a structure already 400 years old when they were discovered. The searchers' shafts that followed, dug with the tools and methods of the 18th and 19th centuries, have consistently collapsed, flooded, or failed. The original construction, built centuries earlier with supposedly primitive methods, remains intact at depth. Two technologies, one site, one official timeline that assigns them both to the same era. The physical evidence does not support that assignment. At 153 feet, a drill brought up a sample of cement. Not modern cement. Pre-modern concrete. Chemical analysis identified the presence of volcanic ash, a pozzolanic additive used in Roman construction to create hydraulic cement that hardens underwater. The technique was lost in Europe after the fall of Rome, and not rediscovered until the 18th century. The sample came from a depth no searcher had reached before drilling. It was not placed there by treasure hunters. It was part of the original construction. Pirates did not use Roman concrete. They did not import volcanic ash. They did not have the metallurgical or chemical knowledge to produce a hydraulic binder. Yet the material is there, at depth, sealed below layers of clay and wood that predate the official discovery of the site by centuries. On Lot 5, investigators examined a stone-lined well. The structure was tested using optically stimulated luminescence, a method that measures the last time mineral grains in the mortar were exposed to sunlight. The result returned a date in the 13th century, 1200s. The same period as the carbon-dated wood. The same period as the lead cross found at Smith's Cove, which matches the chemical signature of a medieval French mine historically associated with the Knights Templar. The cross is small. It is not decorative. It is a marker. The isotopic analysis ties it to a specific region, a specific era, and a specific organization. That is not interpretation. That is materials forensics. The Lot 5 well is not an isolated anomaly. It is part of a pattern that includes the U-shaped structure buried beneath Smith's Cove, a massive wooden framework that served as the intake point for the flood tunnel system, a pattern that includes the stone wharf, a hand-laid expanse of fitted stones on the beach designed to support the weight of heavy cargo during unloading, a pattern that includes the cobblestone road buried in the swamp, a man-made transportation corridor built to move massive objects inland from the shore. These are not random features. They are components of a single engineered system. The muon tomography scan of the garden shaft area detected a high-density metallic mass at depth. Muon tomography works by measuring the absorption of cosmic ray muons as they pass through different materials. Dense materials absorb more muons. The scan identified an object with a density consistent with a large concentration of metal, far denser than surrounding soil or stone. The specific composition of the object has not been released. The geometry has not been published. The data remains proprietary, controlled by the private owners of the island. Not lost. Not disputed. Sealed. What that object is, what it contains, and why its specifications are being withheld are questions the official narrative does not address. The flood tunnel system is redundant. Dye tests conducted in modern excavations confirm that water pumped into the money pit travels through multiple channels to the ocean. Not one tunnel, multiple. At different depths, each one feeding the pit independently, so that blocking one does not stop the flow. To design such a system, the builders would need to understand the subsurface geology of the island. They would need to map the elevation of the water table relative to sea level. They would need to calculate the gradient required for water to flow from the beach to the pit without pumping. They would need to test the system to ensure it functioned as intended. Modern hydrological engineering uses computer modeling, borehole sampling, and geophysical surveys to design drainage systems. Far simpler than this. The original builders had none of that. Yet, the system works. It has worked for centuries. It works today. The swamp contains a stone road. It is not a path. It is a paved highway, buried beneath layers of organic mud. The stones are hand-placed. They are fitted to create a stable surface capable of bearing significant weight. The road runs from the edge of the swamp toward the interior, aligned with the slipway structure found deeper in the swamp itself. The slipway is a wooden ramp preserved in anaerobic mud, built at an angle suitable for hauling ships or large cargo containers out of the water and onto land. Ground-penetrating radar and seismic surveys of the swamp identified a large, symmetrical object buried at the bottom. The object is ship-shaped. It is not a natural geological formation. The return signal indicates wood, metal, and dense organic material arranged in a hull-like structure. Whether it is a ship, a cargo barge, or a purpose-built container designed to be sunk and sealed is unknown. What is known is that it is there, it is man-made, and it is part of the same industrial operation that built the road, the slipway, the wharf, and the flood tunnels. The swamp road was a transport corridor. It connected the ocean to the interior of the island. It allowed heavy materials to be moved inland without relying on soft ground or tidal access. It was not built for a single use. It was built as permanent infrastructure. The alignment of the road with the slipway, the wharf at Smith's Cove, and the stone triangle marker on the shore indicates a unified plan. These features were not added incrementally. They were surveyed, engineered, and constructed as parts of a single system. Modern crews with laser theodolites and GPS mapping have confirmed the geometric relationships between these structures. The alignments are not approximate. They are exact. Whoever built this system understood geometry, surveying, and civil engineering at a level inconsistent with the official timeline. The stone triangle at the shore is a surveyor's mark. It points directly at the money pit. The angle is deliberate. The placement is calculated. Boulders arranged across the island form what researchers have called Nolan's cross, a formation of 5 large stones laid out in a perfect cross shape, 1,200 feet across, aligned with celestial reference points. Whether this is a navigational marker, a territorial claim, or a symbolic structure is debatable. What is not debatable is that it exists, that the stones are not naturally occurring in those positions, and that the geometry required to place them with that precision implies a survey. Water samples taken from deep boreholes in the Money Pit area have been tested for trace elements. The results show concentrations of dissolved gold and silver particles at levels far above natural background. The particles are not from the surrounding bedrock. They are not from modern contamination. They are consistent with the presence of precious metal objects in contact with groundwater over a long period of time. Mercury contamination has been detected in soil samples from multiple locations on the island. Mercury was used historically in 2 contexts: alchemical processes and Spanish mining operations, where it was employed to separate gold and silver from ore through amalgamation. The presence of mercury in concentrations high enough to register in standard soil testing suggests industrial use, not incidental contamination. Fragments of parchment were recovered from a depth of 170 feet. Parchment is animal skin prepared for writing. It does not occur naturally. It degrades rapidly in wet conditions, unless sealed. The fragments brought up from the borehole were small, but they were intact enough to be identified under microscopic analysis. They suggest the presence of a sealed chamber containing written records. Spanish copper coins, maravedis from the early 1600s, have been found in excavation spoils. A rhodolite garnet brooch dated to the 1500s was recovered from the same area. These are not the possessions of laborers. They are high-status objects, consistent with the presence of nobility, military officers, or wealthy merchants. Medieval ox shoes, hand-forged iron fittings designed for heavy draft animals, were found in the swamp. Oxen were used to haul timber, stone, and earth in large-scale construction projects. The presence of ox shoes indicates a workforce and a haulage operation, not a small raiding party. Stone carvings found on the island match symbols used by the Knights Templar during their imprisonment in the Dome prison in France. The symbols are not decorative. They are specific, geometric, and repeatable. The match is not coincidental. It is forensic. Portuguese stone markings consistent with navigational symbols used by the Order of Christ, the Portuguese successor to the Templars, have been identified on island boulders. The Order of Christ funded early Atlantic exploration. They had the ships, the navigational knowledge, and the engineering capability to reach Oak Island in the 14 and 1500s. The engineering techniques used in the island's drainage system match methods documented in Portuguese, Azorian construction from the same period. This is not speculation. It is comparative engineering analysis. Layered charcoal deposits in the swamp indicate the presence of large kilns. Charcoal production at this scale suggests smelting, metalworking, or lime production for mortar. These are industrial processes. They require sustained operation, raw material supply, and skilled labor. Borehole 10X, drilled to a depth of 235 feet, penetrated a cavern. Video footage from a camera lowered into the cavity showed what appeared to be wooden chests, metal objects, and a hand tool. The footage is grainy. The chamber flooded before it could be fully explored. The objects remain unrecovered. Blue china fragments, expensive 1700 pottery, were found in spoil piles. They indicate wealth, status, and the presence of individuals who could afford imported luxury goods. The 90-foot stone, a slab reportedly found at that depth in the original money pit, was inscribed with symbols. The stone itself has been lost. Transcriptions of the symbols exist in multiple sources. Decipherment attempts have produced varying results, but all interpretations reference something buried 40 feet below. Whether the stone was genuine, whether the inscription was a warning or a decoy, and whether it was removed deliberately or lost accidentally, are questions that remain unresolved. What is resolved is the physical evidence still in the ground. The flood tunnels function. The wood is carbon dated. The concrete is chemically analyzed. The road is mapped. The metal mass is scanned. The water contains gold. These are not theories. They are measurements. And every measurement taken with modern instruments makes the official timeline harder to defend. The official history of Oak Island asks you to believe that disorganized pirates, working in secret, without state resources, built a project requiring the logistics, material science, and engineering coordination of a national infrastructure program. It asks you to believe they dug a pit deeper than any mine shaft in colonial North America, engineered a redundant flood tunnel system connected to the ocean at multiple depths, paved an industrial wharf with thousands of hand-laid stones, constructed a subsurface concrete vault using volcanic ash cement, and then buried the entire operation under layers of clay, charcoal, and tropical fiber, imported from thousands of miles away. The official narrative provides no workforce estimate, no material source, no construction timeline, and no logistical explanation. It simply names pirates and closes the file. That is not history. That is a placeholder. The physical evidence on Oak Island does not describe a treasure hunt. It describes a construction site. And the construction is not isolated to one pit. It is distributed across the entire island as a unified, engineered system. Nolan's cross is not a natural arrangement. 5 boulders, each weighing multiple tons, placed in a 1,200-foot geometric cross aligned to celestial reference points. The precision required to survey and position these stones across uneven terrain predates the tools the official timeline assigns to the island by centuries. The Lot 5 stone well returned carbon-14 dates to the 1200s, not the 1700s, not the 1600s, the 1200s. That is a medieval structure. It is not speculative. It is radiocarbon dated. The stone triangle at the shoreline functions as a surveying marker. Its alignment points directly inland toward the money pit. It is not decorative. It is operational. These are not 3 separate mysteries. They are 3 components of the same grid. The anomalies are not isolated. They are indexed to each other. The island was not discovered by accident in 1795. It was rediscovered. What the searchers found was not the beginning of the project. It was the remains of it. The thesis that reconciles all of this evidence is not comfortable. It is not politically neutral. But it is the only engineering inference that survives contact with the data. A pre-Columbian, technologically advanced organization, operating with the resources and institutional continuity of a state or military religious order, executed a long-term industrial operation on Oak Island. The candidates are narrow: the Knights Templar, their Portuguese successors in the Order of Christ, a Spanish colonial mining guild. These are not romantic options. They are the only historical actors with the documented capability, the motive, and the operational security to match what the physical evidence describes. The Templars had Atlantic maritime capability by the 1300s. They had engineering expertise derived from Crusader-era fortification projects. They had reason to move assets out of European jurisdiction after the suppression of 1307. The Order of Christ inherited Templar resources, navigational knowledge, and shipbuilding infrastructure. Portuguese exploration of the Atlantic began decades before Columbus. They had access to the Azores. They had stoneworking techniques that matched the drainage and foundation systems found on Oak Island. The Spanish had mercury-based ore processing, volcanic ash concrete, and a documented presence in the region by the early 1600s. All three groups had the institutional structure to sustain a multi-decade construction operation in a remote location. Pirates did not. And yet the pirate narrative is the one that appears in every official summary, every public tour, every documentary that seeks to avoid the conclusion the evidence actually supports. The narrative is protected, not by argument, by repetition. But the evidence does not cooperate. Carbon-14 dating was not commissioned by conspiracy theorists. It was commissioned by the searchers themselves, by the Legina brothers and their scientific consultants, using accredited laboratories and standard radiometric procedure. The results were not ambiguous. Timber from the Money Pit area, pre-1600s. Wood from the swamp slipway, 1400s. Organic material from the U-shaped structure at Smith's Cove, 1300s. The stone well at Lot 5, 1200s. Every major structural element tested has returned a date that contradicts the pirate origin story. These are not outliers. These are consistent, repeatable, scientifically validated results. The official narrative has no response to them. It simply continues as if the dates were never published. That is not skepticism. That is suppression by omission. The 1200s result is not a marginal finding. It is a chronological reset. If a stone-lined well was constructed on Oak Island in the 1200s, then the island was not untouched wilderness when European explorers arrived. It was already an engineered site. The medieval date does not stand alone. It is corroborated by the lead cross found at Smith's Cove. The cross is small, plain, and made of lead, with a specific isotopic signature. That signature was traced to a mine in southern France. The same mine supplied lead to Templar operations in the 13th century. The cross is not proof of Templar presence, but it is proof that someone brought a 13th century French artifact to Oak Island and left it in a location tied to the flood tunnel system. The alignment is not coincidental. It is archaeological. The dye test removed the last possibility that the flood tunnels were a myth. Fluorescent dye was injected into the Money Pit. It emerged at Smith's Cove. The hydraulic connection is not theoretical. It is demonstrated. Water flows from the ocean through the engineered intake at the cove along a subsurface channel system directly into the pit. The system is functional. It was designed to flood any attempt to excavate the shaft. That is not a natural formation. It is not an accident of geology. It is a booby trap. And it works. Multiple excavation attempts across 2 centuries have been stopped by water inflow that exceeds pumping capacity. The engineering required to construct a gravity-fed flood system at that scale, at that depth, with redundant channels and a concealed intake, is not within the capability range of a small pirate crew working without surveying instruments, without concrete, without a secure supply chain. It is within the capability range of a military engineering corps. The concrete vault is the detail that breaks the narrative cleanly. Drilling at 150 feet encountered a layer of artificial concrete. The concrete contained volcanic ash. Volcanic ash concrete is not a colonial technique. It is a Roman technique, preserved and transmitted through medieval monastic and military engineering traditions. The presence of volcanic ash concrete at depth, beneath layers of undisturbed clay and fill, means the vault was not placed there in the 1700s. It was placed there long before. The chemistry is the timestamp. The stratigraphy confirms it. The swamp is not a swamp. It is a construction zone that was allowed to flood after the project ended. The cobblestone road buried beneath the swamp mud is not a path. It is a causeway. It is wide, stone-paved, and built to carry heavy loads. Its alignment matches the GPS coordinates of the Smith's Cove wharf. That is not an approximation. It is a direct, linear connection between two industrial structures. The road was built to transport cargo from the interior of the island to a loading point on the beach. The ox shoes found along the route are consistent with that use. These are not riding animals. These are draft animals. The shoes are hand-forged iron, sized for heavy haulage work. The road, the shoes, the wharf, and the slipway form a single logistical system. The system was not built to bury treasure. It was built to move processed material. The charcoal layers in the swamp are meters deep. Charcoal in that volume is not the residue of campfires. It is the residue of industrial combustion, kilns, smelting operations, ore processing. The mercury contamination in the soil supports that interpretation. Mercury was used in Spanish and alchemical gold extraction methods. High mercury concentrations in a localized area indicate chemical processing, not storage. The island was not a vault. It was a workshop. The treasure hypothesis is a misreading of the evidence. What the searchers are calling treasure is the industrial output of a site that processed valuable material. The islands continue on location and then shipped it elsewhere. The gold and silver particles detected in borehole water are not proof of a chest full of coins. They are proof of dissolved trace metals in groundwater that pass through ore processing sediment. The parchment fragments brought up from 170 feet are not part of a hidden manuscript. They are the remains of record-keeping documents used by the site's operators. Work logs, manifests, processing schedules. The medieval parchment is consistent with a long-term industrial operation managed by a literate, organized institution. The muon tomography scan of the garden shaft area detected a massive, high-density object deep underground. Muon tomography is not speculative technology. It is particle physics applied to subsurface imaging. It works by measuring the absorption of cosmic ray muons as they pass through different materials. High-density materials absorb more muons. The scan showed a concentrated mass with a density signature inconsistent with rock or soil. It is metal. It is large, and it is exactly where the flood tunnel system would require a counterweight or ballast structure to regulate water pressure. The object is not treasure. It is infrastructure. But the mystery is more profitable than the solution. Oak Island is not an archaeological problem. It is a media franchise. The television series, the tourism, the licensing, the branded merchandise, the annual search updates, all of it depends on the mystery remaining unresolved. A definitive answer ends the story. A definitive non-treasure answer, such as a medieval lime kiln, a smelting complex, or a Templar-era industrial outpost, ends the revenue model. The mystery is protected because the mystery is the product. That is why the excavation continues without a published research plan. That is why findings are announced on television before they are peer-reviewed. That is why carbon-14 dates that contradict the narrative are mentioned once, and then never integrated into the official interpretation. The mechanism of suppression is not a shadowy counsel. It is economic incentive aligned with narrative control. The search is not designed to end. It is designed to continue. Every new scan, every new borehole, every new artifact is presented as the breakthrough that will solve the mystery. But the solution is already visible. It has been visible since the dye test. It has been visible since the 1200s date came back from the lab. The island is a construction site. The flood tunnels are real. The subsurface structures are older than the official timeline. The engineering is consistent with a state-level or military religious actor. The treasure hypothesis does not fit the data. The industrial hypothesis does. But the industrial hypothesis does not sustain a television series. And so the search continues. And the mystery is preserved. And the evidence is compartmentalized. And the conclusion is deferred. The precision of the system is its own argument. The stone wharf at Smith's Cove covers thousands of square feet. Each stone was placed by hand. The surface is level. The drainage is functional. The intake for the flood tunnel system is concealed within the paved area, protected by layers of coconut fiber that prevent silt from clogging the channels. Coconut fiber does not grow in Nova Scotia. It was imported, in bulk, from the Caribbean or farther. That is not the action of a pirate crew. That is the action of a supply chain. The U-shaped structure buried beneath the beach is not a shipwreck. It is a framework. Its geometry is intentional. It functions as a massive intake manifold, channeling water from the ocean into the subsurface tunnel system. The wood is preserved because it was buried in anaerobic mud. The carbon-14 date places it in the 1300s. The structure is not a remnant. It is a component. It was built as part of the system. It is still doing what it was designed to do. The paradox of precision is this: every improvement in measurement technology makes the official explanation less plausible. Seismic surveys revealed the flood tunnels. Ground-penetrating radar revealed the swamp road. Muon tomography revealed the subsurface mass. Sonar mapping revealed the ship-shaped anomaly at the bottom of the swamp. Each new dataset adds complexity. Each new complexity pushes the required engineering capability further beyond what the pirate narrative can contain. The more exactly the island is measured, the more impossible the official story becomes. The precision is not the mystery. The precision is the solution. And the solution is that Oak Island was not a hiding place. It was a working site. The swamp road was an industrial causeway. Its GPS alignment with the Smith's Cove wharf is not approximate. It is direct. The road is stone-paved and built to a consistent width. It descends slightly toward the cove, allowing for drainage and heavy cart traffic. The ox shoes found along its length confirm its use. Oxen were the primary draft animals for moving processed ore, smelted metal, or bulk materials in pre-industrial operations. The road connected the interior production area, likely located near the swamp where fuel and water were abundant, to the wharf, where ships could be loaded. The wharf itself is not a beach. It is a constructed platform, reinforced with timber and stone, capable of supporting the weight of cargo transfer operations. The alignment is the proof of intent. The engineering is the proof of capability. The road was not built to hide something. It was built to move something. Repeatedly. Over years. That is the practical answer. The money pit was not a treasure vault. It was a shaft. The flood tunnels were not a trap to protect gold. They were a drainage and security system to protect an operational site from unauthorized excavation or interference. The concrete vault at depth was not a chest. It was a foundation or a sump. The parchment fragments were not a secret map. They were work documents. The gold particles in the water were not evidence of a hoard. They were evidence of processing runoff. The island was a facility. The facility processed valuable material. The material was removed. What remains is the infrastructure. The search has been looking for the output. The output is gone. What is still there is the machine. History called it a treasure pit because the searchers wrote the first accounts, and the searchers were treasure hunters. The story was written by people looking for gold. The stone was not consulted. Stone holds the original specification. The wharf is still there, the road is still there. The flood tunnels still function. The U-shaped structure is still in place. The alignment is still measurable. The carbon-14 dates are still published. The dye test is still replicable. The measurement is still there. It has been waiting.